All right. Well, I am Devin. I am the outreach coordinator. I usually mainly do work with GIG Cares, but I also do GIG stuff kind of everywhere, wherever I'm needed. So we put together a little back to school webinar. So if you guys have questions or anything that you want answered, Erica probably has the answer to all of your questions. Um, so we do have a sponsor for this event. It is Antonina's, and so we were really grateful that they were able to help us. It was kind of short notice, but they're so amazing. Cynthia, do you have anything?
No, I'll just introduce myself. I'm Cynthia Kelly. I am the executive director here, and I'm just really looking forward to hearing Illuminata's story and what Erica can add as far as value, because this is a big issue when it comes to school.
That is true. So Illuminata is one of our teen advisory board members. She's been with us probably like 6 months now, but she's been coming to teen summits for the past, I would say like 3 or 4 years, maybe even longer than that. So if you want to go ahead and tell your story.
Yeah, so what I'm going to be talking about is how I was planning on going on a trip with my band, and it was going to be going to Washington, D.C. And this was both a band and color guard, and I'm in color guard. And so we're talking to our band booster travel coordinator about going there, and he said it would be great, it would work out with my celiac disease, and that he could accommodate it, and that my parents could come and they could help me with the food and they could deliver dinner. And so we were thrilled when he told us that it would work and I was able to fully participate, that I was going to be able to fully participate in the Washington trip. And so my parents would have breakfast items and a packed lunch in their hotel room for me daily, and they would drop off my dinner wherever the group was located at dinner time. And this actually worked well. I went to New York, where I participated at the United Nations 68th Commission for Women conference with Girl Scouts, and it also worked when I went to Louisiana with my youth group and volunteered at UMCOR. So my mom made an extra contribution to the booster for being so easy and accommodating, and we made the trip payments. And a few weeks before the trip, we received a You're a Burden email urging us to not worry about my parents helping with my accommodations. The coordinator would feed me his version of gluten-free from the tour restaurants. Having my parents provide my food was too much hassle, and the coordinator didn't want to have to call my parents to let them know when and where to drop off my dinner. My mom reminded the coordinator that he had agreed to the accommodations when we signed up for the trip at the beginning of the year. She also asked the school principal to meet with her and the coordinator to remedy the situation. The school principal said the booster was an independent entity, and therefore he had no authority. My mother then sent copies of the original emails with the agreement and some celiac disease information, and the coordinator became hostile. He said we could go, but he wouldn't give us the plane or hotel reservation information until he was good and ready. My mom offered to get an attorney to work through the situation. She said it may help others in similar situations, but I said no. It wasn't the right time, and because the travel coordinator didn't seem to want to take care of me, I didn't feel safe with the food situation, and it was also very little time before the trip, and we didn't even have the trip information yet. So I decided to pull out of the trip, and my mom got most of our money back, but not all of it. And then within a week, my mom found a gluten-free 101 course online. And after a couple weeks of the class, she suggested that we set up a 504 plan. That I agreed to, and my mother reached out to the school counselor. The counselor sent her the vice principal's contact information, and my mother made a 504 plan and meeting date. The vice principal also sent my mom a list of documents that we needed to bring to the meeting. Using what she'd learned from the Gluten-Free 101 course, my mother filled out the forms and created a medical history timeline and gathered the supporting documents. She also included a celiac disease overview she'd gotten from the Gluten-Free 101 course, and prepared a letter with my requested accommodations. We included the justifications for each accommodation request needed for me to thrive in school. The accommodations were in a letter format from my doctor, and we took the letter into my doctor and she looked it over and then signed it. And then a week or so later, we met with the vice principal and a nurse at my high school, and we were prepared, and the vice principal was as well for the meeting. The vice principal had contacted the school district about the color guard trip, band trip, and received an email from the district's Equal Opportunity Services stating that my accommodations had to be allowed in school and at any school-related event or activity. The booster travel coordinator and the principal were both wrong in that case. My 504 plan was quickly approved, and all of my requested accommodations were included. I didn't get to go to DC with the band or color guard, but I know my rights and others know them too. And then the vice principal sent copies of the Equal Opportunity Services email to the booster board and the principal, so they would know as well. My hope is that not only can I avoid similar situations in the future, but educating the community helps other students avoid them too. And because of the span situation, I feel passionately about advocating for gluten-free and celiac accommodations. And I also, as she just told you, joined the teen advisory board, and also am planning on starting a gluten-free celiac club at my school soon. And also going off of that, my family and I did actually get to go to Washington, D.C. and during spring break, and we had so much fun.
That's great. Thank you so much for sharing. I know her mom had told me that one, her story first, and it was just, I loved it. And then this came up, and I was like, oh my gosh, she has to share. She has to let these other parents know that it's not just them. And some people are very difficult to work with, but that's why there's some accommodations. So thank you for sharing, Illuminata. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Um, I know you have some schoolwork to do, so if you do need to hop off, that's okay. So then we have Erica. Do you want to introduce yourself, Erica?
Hi, I'm Erica now that I've unmuted myself. Can you all hear me? Just a raise of hands. Can I make sure? Okay, just make sure. I am a celiac disease advocate. I also advocate for other digestive diseases. I've been doing this for a really long time. I also am an editor for the Generation GF magazine. We just got our issue in the mail. So if you have a GF kid, definitely sign up for that. And I am super passionate about helping GF kids just live their best life and give them the most opportunities possible, because I feel like when you're diagnosed, you feel very different, you feel other than, and it's really difficult to feel like you can fit in. But going over what I'm going to go over with 504 plans, a little bit about what Illuminata went through, we can all feel like we're part of this. We're part of a community within our school, we're a part of our community in general, and we can all work to do the same thing that everyone else does, so we don't have to feel other than. But there are special accommodations, which is exactly what I'm going to go through, so your school life is a lot easier. So with that, I'm going to share my screen. Okay, can everyone see me? Can I get a hands up or a shake of a head? Awesome, love it. Can you also see me too? Oh, fun. So I can actually do broad hand gestures. So this is obviously the back to school course, back to school celiac disease. This also is a part of a legal issue that we'll talk about with 504 plans that can apply to someone with a gluten intolerance. We'll just have to talk about the medical differences between that. So let's jump into it. You heard earlier with Illuminata referencing a 504 plan. So a 504 plan is just an accommodation document that is for people with a disability. So it goes back to the 70s and the Americans with Disabilities Act, and the 504 plan ensures that a student with disability can get equal access to education in publicly funded schools. So what I'm about to go through is going through the 504 plan. And I do want to share, it's an instruction manual. Yes, this is fantastic news, but you'll see that I bolded publicly funded schools. Because it is government focused, because it was under the Americans with Disability Act, it talks only about publicly funded schools. Now, if we talk about religious schools or private institution or homeschooling, I mean, you wouldn't necessarily need this with homeschooling because you're homeschooled, you're at your own home. So usually it is very safe for you as someone with celiac disease. But if you're part of a school that does not receive public funds from the government, first of all, that's very rare that they don't receive any public funding. But you can use that loose, you can use what I'm saying loosely as a guide for private institutions. But again, 504 plan, if we're just talking about legalities, it is for anyone receiving public funds from the government. Okay, so moving forward, a lot of people ask me, like, honestly, celiac disease, it doesn't seem so bad, right? You just have to be gluten-free. Is it really a disability? Like, what are you even talking about? Yes, celiac disease is a disability. So while as a person with celiac disease, I may not go around saying, I have a disability, I have a disability. And it may not even be language that we use around kids who are gluten-free. We use this term because it is a legal term that is honored by the US government. It has a actual factual basis for it, meaning a disability is something that substantially limits one or more major life activities. So eating is a life activity, learning is a life activity, and celiac can drastically affect those two. So that's very important to be able to share that yes, celiac disease is a disability. I will get to non-celiac gluten sensitivity in a second when it comes to what you need to fill out a 504 plan. But do realize that anything that affects, like we're talking about food allergies, Crohn's disease, anything that affects kind of a major bodily function and limits your life activities, you are a part of ADA, whether you consider yourself to be disabled or not. So a lot of people ask me, okay, what's a 504 plan? I've heard of that. Or in my school, I have an IEP, or in my school, I have an IHCP. These are a lot of words thrown around when we talk about a 504 plan. These are very similar documents that you may deal with. Maybe if you have a child who has autism or a child who has ADHD, you may be more familiar with the term IHP or IHCP. Regardless, that's under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, an IDEA Act, you may hear. Regardless, these are all kind of just plans that you put together with your school to help you and your family for a child with a disability to live normal within their school, to thrive, to not only survive but also to thrive. So whether it's an IEP or a 504 plan, just know that your school does have some sort of documented plan that you will go through. We're going to go through 504 plans, but an IEP is very, very similar. So you'll just have to check in with your school to see what they traditionally have and what you like to use. A 504 plan is legally binding, so is an IEP. It is used differently in some schools. Again, it all depends on your school and your school district. I can't say for each one of you attending here which one works for you, but you may hear those words. And we're all talking about the same issue, so don't be confused. Another thing before I even dive into 504 plans, you may have heard that the government is making some changes around some things. The government is making some big strategic changes to the Department of Education, some big strategic changes to the Office of Civil Rights, the disability offices in federal government. Regardless of how things change, there are a lot of subject matter experts with legal degrees that say right now, and as of the school year, the 504 plan is still legally binding. And while the federal government still may not have a concept of where they're going with the Department of Education or their changes in the Department of Education, right now the 504 plan is the easiest and most legally binding document that you can use on a school level for a safety plan for your child. So just so you know, because a lot of people are like, I don't know, what are they doing at the Department of Education? I don't think they even know. But right now, it is still a good document to have for this year and for the future. Okay, so what is a 504 plan? How do I make one? It is basically just a document, a Word document. There are so many templates on the internet. It's hard for me to just find one and say, use this, but there are a lot of opportunities for you to look at 504 plans on the internet that would make the most sense for you. There's templates online. Your school district may have one. Your school may have one. It really just depends on what they use. So first and foremost, ask your school. What do you use? Do you use a 504 plan? Do you use an IEP? Do you have a standard template that you'd like me to use? Next, you're going to, regardless of what template you use or regardless of a 504 or an IEP plan, you're going to need a medical statement by a state licensed health professional. That's the biggest thing. People ask me if it's a doctor, if it's a nurse. At this point, it doesn't matter. Literally, they all just say state licensed health professional. So this is where you would say, my child has celiac disease, my child has non-celiac gluten sensitivity, and it has a severe intolerance to this to the point where it will drastically affect their day-to-day life in school and drastically affect their learning opportunities. So the best part is to not start from scratch because there are a million templates out there. But unless you know what you're looking for, they can kind of seem overwhelming, which is why I'm not showing you a template now, because you want to learn what's in it first before you go searching on the internet, because it feels very overwhelming when you see a million different documents and you're like, I don't even know what I need to say. So we're going to teach you on what to say. So, what's included in this? A 504 document, again, is something that is given to your school and everyone that will touch any part of your child's daily learning throughout the day. And we'll talk about who to give it to, but this will include food service in the cafeteria, the school nurse, your teachers, the substitute teachers, your principal, anyone on the executive staff of your school. And it's basically going to say, listen, my child has celiac disease. We just talked about how it's a medical necessity. You'll have a doctor's note. This condition drastically affects my child's learning potential. And there are certain things that need to be reasonably accommodated within my child's daily school life. This can include, just like what Illuminata was talking about earlier, field trips, band trips, sports practices, anything where something containing gluten may affect your child at any point during the day. So out of school activities, I think is one of the biggest ones that people talk about on this because, field trips, band trips, all these things are really important because you're out of school. You're out of your normal, hey, I got this. I know everything about what's in my classroom. But if I travel with color guard to DC, who's going to get my meals? Who is going to help me with this? Again, exactly what the story was before I came on. It just illustrated perfectly why you need an IEP and for the exact type of trips that the 504 plan is meant to help with. It will also include medicine protocols. So celiac disease differs a little bit from food allergies. If you're doing something for a food allergy kiddo, you're going to have like, this is my epinephrine protocol, right? If I have a peanut and I notice that I'm having more two systemic body issues at the same time, like my eyes are watering and I'm wheezing, this is what happens, how to give an EpiPen. This is where the EpiPen lives. My child has 2 EpiPens that live in the nurse's office, 2 EpiPens that live here. It's a little different for people with celiac disease or non-celiac gluten sensitivity because there isn't really a medicine. But if your child should have Tums or something to help them with nausea or vomiting if it occurs during school and they can't go home, that's a type of protocols that you're going to want to put in this. There's also in-school exposures on stuff like art class. A lot of people talk about like, hey, is Play-Doh being given to my kid? Are you making paper mache where you're using wheat paste and you don't want to touch it? That's part of it. I don't know of any other, like when I was in school, we had home ec, so that would also be something. It's not traditionally done in school anymore, but if your kid does have a classroom where it's a cooking class, that would be part of it too. The school bus is always part that people tend to leave out. Like, is food allowed on the school bus? How is that a part of the 504 plan? And food occasions. So the biggest two that usually get brought up and the biggest things typically are in 504 plans are these food occasions outside of field trips. So one is lunch. You may be a peanut-free school, so that may be taken care of for someone with a food allergy, but you're not a gluten-free school. So do you have a protocol where you have talked to the school lunch person and the people in the cafeteria know how to give a gluten-free meal, and they understand that if they don't have a gluten-free meal to call you? What is the protocol on that? Do you have a protocol where they can sit with someone else who has gluten around them, or do you have to be separated? I always recommend for kids to be together with other kids that may be different, that may be eating gluten, just so they can have a typical exposure to what everyday life is. Because when you get to the workforce, you're going to be eating lunch next to someone who doesn't have a gluten-free meal. But again, it's all up to you and individually how you feel about your kid. And then the next is interim birthday celebrations, which when we get people writing into the magazine, that is always, always what they talk about. You know, Johnny is in class and he's gluten free. And the mom has written, Johnny's mom has written a million times that they can't have cupcakes in class because Johnny feels left out because he's gluten free. And they never bring gluten free cupcakes for him. So he always feels alone. Now, the mom can say, Johnny's mom can say, hey, I'm just going to bring a pack of 12 Antonina's, I can't say that, Antonina's gluten-free bakery cupcakes because they're so freaking good. I'm going to put them in the freezer. And when we have a birthday that is unannounced, little Johnny can go to the freezer in the school nurse's office and get a cupcake to feel like he's part of the party. Or are you a food-free classroom? A lot of classrooms are going to food-free. So if that's the case, and if someone brings in cupcakes, even though it's a food-free classroom, like what is the protocol? This is a lot more sensitive for people with food allergies, like if they just bring peanuts into the classroom kind of thing. For people with celiac disease, it's more of, I want to feel like I'm part of the celebration as well. They want to feel included. And it's more of a psychosocial aspect too, that like, I think little Johnny also needs a cupcake when everyone else got a cupcake too. So that's part of what would be included in this 504 plan, is to talk about incidences like that. So a typical thing would be, hey, I'm Johnny's mom. If you know of a child's birthday and a mom has already said they're going to bring in cupcakes, text me and I can bring over cupcakes. Or I'm going to have Johnny keep a 6-pack of cupcakes in the freezer, and please get them whenever you have a birthday party come by. So those are some things that would be discussed in the 504 plan. So you always want to consider these things as well because they're not really top of mind. A gluten-free meal option for school served meals. So this is, I think, the biggest issue, and it requires the most work on your end when discussing with a school or a school district, is what are your plans for a reasonable accommodation for a gluten-free meal at school? So they technically have to provide a reasonable substitute for a gluten-free meal. Now, will little gluten-free Johnny think that it's a reasonable substitution? Maybe if he gets a hot dog and a hot dog bun and everyone else gets pizza, Johnny may not think it's a reasonable accommodation. But legally it is, because it has the same nutritional value and he's still getting a carb and a meat and a cheese. It's all based on what people think is reasonable, which is all the hassle with a 504 plan. Is it really depends on whose idea of reasonable accommodation it is. But you're always going to work with them to get the best possible option, right? So it's not always going to be the exact same meal. It may not even look as good or taste as good, but it's going to be reasonable. You're also going to want to ask, if you can, for access to a refrigerator, freezer, and microwave. Again, like I'm saying, to store food, to store extra treats, just in case moments. Also, access to a bathroom without limitations or restrictions. Some schools, especially younger kids who don't have the capacity to really discuss what they need, they may experience accidents if they've had a recent glutening, or if they're like still dealing with residual gluten issues, or they still have uncontrolled like diarrhea from a celiac disease diagnosis. Access to bathroom without limitations is really important and without restrictions. So some people, like, you have to wait, or you have to do this, or you have to take a certain key. It has to be a reasonable accommodation for your specific child and what their bathroom needs are. And then also always, always, always include emergency contacts. Always, just in case. You never know. I mean, I think the school will probably have your emergency contact for other reasons too. Always important to be on a 504 plan. Like, here's how you reach me. And also here is like my work number, just in case. And also more to consider. Again, there's certain language in 504 plans that you can really take advantage of. And I pulled this sentence because I think it's a really important sentence. So, in certain situations, disability accommodations may require additional equipment, separate or designated storage and preparation areas, surfaces or utensils, and specific staff training and expertise. That is really all we're looking for, especially for celiac disease. So we're hoping that the school will have a separate meal prep area for cafeteria food, a designated zone, maybe designated utensils that are gluten-free or for your specific food allergy, and specific staff training and expertise. This is part of the ADA. This is a very powerful paragraph for you to know that these are your rights for. Then even more to consider, this is what I'm talking about before. What is actually a reasonable accommodation or reasonable modification? And the last part, and this is kind of touchy, but are you being respectful and are you being a team player? You catch more flies with honey instead of vinegar, right? I think that's the line. Either way, you got to play nice in the sandbox, literally and physically, right? So if you go to your first meeting with your school principal and your teachers, and you've never met these people, and you're like, my child is extra special and they need all these things, or they can't learn, and you're horrible people, I don't feel like that's a good first experience that you have with your child's teacher or your child's team, or your school nurse or whatever. It's all about being a team player. They want to help your child succeed just as much as you do. They may not know how to. So I think that that's really important to understand. It's like, they're just people too. Like, they probably have kids in school, and that's why they decide to be teachers or principals. Like, they get it. But being respectful and being really kind it really does go a long way. And again, understanding, like, is this really a reasonable accommodation, or are you really asking them to step way beyond their boundaries just to make you feel comfortable? It's always something to think about when you're having all these big asks. So you write this 504 plan. You found this great template online. Now that you know what you want to include in it, and you're like, oh yeah, Johnny's art class and Johnny's cupcakes and all those things. Now I know what I want in it. Now you actually have to have a meeting, and you schedule a meeting with the staff. You go through the 504 plan, and they either say yes or no. And I think if you're making these reasonable requests, they can say, yes, I think this is a great idea. I think these are all great requests, but we do have a revision. He can't store cupcakes here, but he can store cupcakes there. So you make the revision, you send it back to them, and you say, great, let's execute on this throughout the rest of the year. Now, you may have additional forms that you have to fill out. There's one that's typically brought up. It's called Request for Special Dietary Accommodations. If your school has a form, of course, fill out that form. Do whatever the school asks you to, because that's who's going to make these accommodations for your kiddo. And then every year you are to review this annually. It's not a one and done, and your kiddo may change expectations throughout the year. So you'll definitely need to review this annually with whatever new teachers, whatever staff. Who do I send it to? Great question. Everyone that your kiddo may have interaction with. So, one I didn't put on here, and it's kind of under teachers, is like band teachers, like sports coaches. I mean, they're all typically teachers in the system, But if you are a part of an extracurricular activity, make sure that person gets it as well. You want to make sure that you're working with food service, the school nurse, and obviously the head staff, and then have opportunities to leave more 504 plans for substitute teachers as well, should your teacher be sick. Okay, what if something bad happens? Because it's always going to happen. There are always going to be mistakes. Oh my gosh, Johnny's friend Samantha had a birthday and nobody told me, and Johnny came home crying because everyone had cupcakes but Johnny. Why didn't anyone read the 504 plan and alert me to come in with cupcakes? Why didn't anyone read the 504 plan and alert me that I needed to go get something from the freezer? Mistakes happen. Teachers are just people. Principals are just people. Nurses are just people. Like, we all make mistakes. Communication is key. Hopefully it's not a big mistake. Hopefully it's not you got glutened and hopefully it's just like an issue with, oh, they didn't listen to me. How can I make this better? Mistakes happen. If a mistake happens, you're going to review it with the 504 team. You're going to go up the ladder. So first you're going to talk to the teacher. If the teacher was like, that was my mistake, I'm so sorry, let's review the 504 plan. I'm so sorry, this won't happen again. This is the number. Now I understand what you meant by this on the 504 plan. Now that it's happened, let's talk about it. Great. You'll just let the principal know and say, hey, this happened at 504 plan, just so you know. Little Johnny wasn't alerted to the cupcakes, but it's going to change. I talked to the teacher. Now, if there's additional training, say you had someone new come to the cafeteria worker and they gave your kid gluten and they got glutened, huge issue, right? Maybe there's additional training that you can layer in with it. Or if nothing's working and your school is full of horrible, mean people and somehow you just can't work with them, that's when you level up to like the district level. And if you can't get anywhere there, then you level up to the state level and then it's the federal level. But federal level, like I said, have enough things to worry about right now. So you may get way more done just focusing on your school level, your district level, and your state level. So what else? I know that there are questions. I think the biggest thing is, yes, we've talked about this when it comes to maybe elementary school, junior high, and high school, right? A 504 plan can continue on and through college, but that goes into a whole nother issue where we talk about disability services on staff for schools, for public universities or private universities have different options as well. But really, 504 plans are traditionally used for elementary school all the way up to high school. Now, by the time you hit high school, you're really hoping that your kid is an amazing advocate. They're part of GIG Cares. They're part of the Teen Advisory Board. Like, they're into it. They love it. They're advocating it for themselves. If not, if you have a kid who is just like, I don't want to be a part of this at all, I'd rather be as quiet as possible about it, that's when a 504 plan can really be helpful. But again, you always want to make sure that your child is also learning these things as well so they can be their own advocate. So the next time someone's like, I don't think that's gluten-free pizza that they serve me in the cafeteria, they know to talk to someone about this with a 504 plan. And that way you don't even have to be involved because the child is now advocating for themselves based on the plan. So I know that there are only a few of you on, but if you have any questions, I'm more than welcome, or more than happy to answer any questions that you may have about a 504 plan. Again, I'm not a legal scholar in this. I do have people who are, but they're expensive. So I gave you the non-expensive, non-lawyer version of what a 504 plan is. Anyone, audience members? Oh, thank you. Thank you, Marie.
Erica, can you speak to whether or not 504 plans extend on into college?
Yeah, so legally, yes, they do. Again, when you have this, it's a school by school, year by year basis. So of course, you're not going to be in the same school district. You're going to be at a college and university. So when you do, you really have to go to the Office of Disability Services, Student Services, under Disability Services. They all have different names depending on the college. But when you go there, like, literally you could take a 504 plan that you've had in high school and be like, this is it. But reasonable accommodations change so much in college, depending on if you are living on campus or if you're living at home. If you're living at home, you're going to be fed at home. You're going to maybe not use dining services. You're going to be maybe only eating out at a few restaurants. You really don't need that much assistance from disability services unless it's like, if I'm sick, I need to have an extension on this. So you'll talk to them about very different things than say you would when you're in high school and you're like there for 8 hours a day and the teacher really owns you at that point. And you're in college, if you don't like a class and you feel sick, you can just leave. I mean, don't tell college kids that, but like you can just leave, right? Like you don't, like no one is making you stay in class. If you have to go to the bathroom, you can just go to the bathroom. You don't have to raise your hand. So it's a different set of disability services needed or ADA requirements for college. Whereas for that, it's primarily working with your dining services. If you're required to purchase a meal plan, and do you have a gluten-free dining hall? Or do I have certain requirements to where I'm allowed to access a certain gluten-free pantry at some time? So a lot of it's all based on money in the dining plan versus like my well-being because a child under 18 is being taken care of by a parent.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I have one. Like when you're saying reasonable accommodations, we're talking about food, but also like when you have kids doing science experiments, that might include like a gluten flour, or
Mhm,
if they're gonna do a project or an experiment or craft,
mhm.
and in talking to the science teacher, and they can't be able to provide, and they're asking me to bring stuff. Can I expect them to be able the school to provide supplies that are safe for my kid, or or should I just go ahead and bring the stuff?
I mean, so I would, in order to not, great question. Like reasonable in that case might be my child is an observer and I'm not participating in the touching of the product. If they're making paper mache, like sculptures and you're graded on the sculpture, then yes, it would probably be good for them to be able to provide a gluten-free option because everyone has to use the material to be graded on something. If you're doing a simple science experiment and someone is pouring in something to gluten or you're touching gluten, can your child be an observer without actually needing to be touching gluten? If your child wants to be a part of it and the grade is actually the activity, then they should have a reasonable accommodation. But if it's like, oh, gluten-free flour costs this much money and we need 10 pounds to do this experiment, that's a little iffy. That's where the reasonable is kind of like this gray area. But again, I would say like if my child can just be an observer, great. Like when I was dissecting pigs, there were people who were like, I have an ethical, like moral, like, I can't do this. I have an issue with this. So it's like, great. Well, you're going to watch someone do it. You're not going to do it yourself and you're going to do the same homework, right? So you're an observer and you get to do the same thing that you're graded on. Whereas like if it's you're graded on the end project that happens to include gluten. It's just like such specific questions that it's really hard. But again, reasonable is such a gray area. And if you want to ruffle feathers and say pay for it, do it. And that's why some people are just like, I'm just going to do it myself because I don't want to ruffle feathers. But it's up to you to determine what you think is really reasonable. And they can push back and you can push back too. Sorry, no, there's not like a direct answer to that.
No, I know. It's just hard. I'm just thinking like, okay, we're trying to create, okay, my daughter's the only one at the whole school. There's 1,000 kids. I'm pretty sure there's more kids that have not been diagnosed.
Yeah.
But like you're thinking you're breaking through as far as for them to try to provide a reasonable accommodation. I'm not asking them to do, but for the next kid that will be coming into the school with celiac, for the
Mhm.
school to kind of have a bigger awareness. And I'm not saying I can be able to provide my kids supplies, but what happens if the next parent can't, just
Exactly. Yeah, and it's something that they should always be aware of any issues. So it's not like you're gonna, run it up the flagpole every time you see something like that's not accommodating. But you want to make it aware, at least to the art teacher, be like, hey, just so you know, this includes gluten. I can provide a whatever, or my child is just going to observe. But like in the future, it's really easy just to purchase this alternative. It's like, yeah, you have to do the heavy lifting, but I mean, we've all had to do the heavy lifting for whatever generation of celiac disease people come after us. So just think of it as like, I just want to be the person to make you aware that we could make this more accommodating.
Thank you.
Of course. Anything else?
I don't know. I don't have any questions. I think you did a really good job. Thank you. That was really good.
Thanks, Devin. Yeah, and if anyone else has any questions, if you go to gluten.org, just search 504, and there are a lot of articles on 504 plans. And like I said, the internet is full of examples of 504 plans or IEP plans that you can use and just, plug and chug based on what we talked about that fits for your unique needs.
Well, that was all we really had planned for tonight. So if anybody does have questions, you can reach out to me. We're gonna send out a short little email. It's gonna have a little survey in it. If you want to fill it out, it would be lovely. Just so that we can kind of plan better for the future. If there's anything that you want to hear about, like specifically, if there's things that maybe you think you would like to hear from us, go ahead and give those suggestions. And then since this was recorded, we are gonna share it somewhere. I'm not 100% sure where, but we will share it. So, yeah.
Devin, can I give a quick plug for the dermatology one coming up?
Yeah.
At the end of September, we're going to have a dermatologist come and talk about the different skin manifestations that can be impacted by gluten. So it is meant for healthcare professionals, but we know that it's of interest to a lot of people. So you will see, if you're a GIG member, if you get our newsletters, you'll see information coming in it. Okay.
Right. Well, Shannon, if you want to stop the recording. I don't know if I can stop the recording.